The afternoon sun filtered through crystal champagne flutes and bone china teacups, casting delicate shadows across the manicured lawn where my aunt's elite garden party was in full swing. Floral dresses swished against designer handbags, pearls gleamed at privileged throats, and the air hung thick with perfume, pretension, and fake laughter. I stood near the antique tea cart, my hands trembling slightly as I poured Earl Grey into my aunt's favorite porcelain cup. That's when I heard it. My aunt leaned toward my cousin's wife and whispered, loudly enough for half the garden to hear, "Poor thing, she's basically financially hopeless. She'll never afford a real place in this neighborhood. I just pray she finds someone rich to marry. Otherwise, she's destined for rental apartments forever." The words sliced through me like ice water. My throat tightened, my chest constricted. But then something flickered in my peripheral vision. Through the pristine bay window of my aunt's heavily mortgaged house, past the rose bushes and trimmed hedges, I could see it, the sprawling stone facade of the $4.8 million estate that I had purchased 18 months ago. The same estate that was entirely, completely, gloriously paid for in full, not a single mortgage payment. The irony was suffocating. My aunt continued explaining to surrounding relatives how she had tried so hard to help me understand financial responsibility, how it was such a shame that some people just couldn't grasp wealth building. They had no idea. They were sitting meters away from my private paradise, calling me hopeless. The slow burn of rage spreading through my veins didn't show on my face. I took another sip of tea and let them continue, because I knew something they didn't. The revenge I had been quietly preparing was about to unfold spectacularly, and I wouldn't have to say a single word. For as long as I can remember, I have been the underestimated one in my family, the one they pitied and compared unfavorably to my golden child cousin at every opportunity. My cousin brought home a B+, and my parents threw celebrations, calling them future CEO material and destined for greatness. Meanwhile, I could earn straight A's, win competitions, and the response would be a distracted nod. The message was clear. My achievements didn't count. The financial judgments started early too. When I was 19, working at a coffee shop to save for college, my aunt made snide comments about wasting time in service work, while my cousin got prestigious internships through family connections. When I talked about investment strategies at 21, the family laughed. My aunt literally wiped tears from her eyes and said, "You, an investor? Oh, sweetie, that's adorable. Focus on surviving before dreaming about real estate portfolios." While my cousin received cash gifts, help with rent, co-signed luxury car leases, and seed money for failing business ideas, I received lectures. I received concerned calls asking if I was still struggling. When I moved into a tiny studio I could afford alone, my aunt visited once, looked around with disgust, and said, "At least it's a roof over your head. Maybe one day you'll afford something in a real neighborhood." The constant message was that I was financially irresponsible, naive, and hopeless. They created this narrative and repeated it until even I almost believed it. But here's what they didn't see. While they praised my cousin's mediocre career and bailed them out of disasters, I was working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. While they had champagne brunches discussing my cousin's promising future, I was reading books about real estate investment, taking free courses, studying every successful investor's strategy. I sacrificed every luxury, every vacation, every expensive dinner. I wore the same 5 outfits for 3 years, brought lunch from home daily, and tracked every penny. Without anyone's help or acknowledgement, I built something real. My first property was a duplex everyone called too risky. I lived in one unit, rented the other, and learned plumbing and electrical from YouTube at 2 in the morning. I dealt with difficult tenants and emergency repairs while my family asked when I would get serious about finances. I sold that duplex for profit, leveraged into a triplex, then another property. Each step was calculated, researched, and executed with the discipline that comes from having no safety net. By 32, I had built a portfolio generating passive income while I continued working and saving aggressively. Then I saw it, the $4.8 million estate directly next to my aunt's house in the neighborhood where she said I would never belong. The invitation to my aunt's garden party arrived on embossed cardstock with gold lettering, screaming, "I have money and need you to know it." I almost declined, but something made me accept. Maybe curiosity, maybe timing, maybe because I knew something they didn't. I arrived in a simple navy dress, bringing a thoughtful hostess gift. My aunt greeted me with that smile that doesn't reach the eyes, saying, "Oh, you made it. I worried with your unstable financial situation you'd be too overwhelmed to attend." The party was predictable: expensive cheese no one enjoyed, champagne and crystal flutes, conversations that were status competitions about vacations, car leases, and country club memberships. My cousin held court describing their Europe trip, casually mentioning business-class flights and five-star hotels. My aunt beamed, telling everyone how my cousin worked so hard and deserved this luxury, omitting her $5,000 contribution and help securing the promotion. I sat quietly when the conversation shifted toward me. My aunt's friend asked with performative concern, "How are you doing? Still working that little job?" Before I could answer, my aunt jumped in. "She's managing. It's hard when you don't have the right foundation. Some people just struggle more with financial decisions." Then came the moment that changed everything. My aunt, thinking I had stepped away, said loudly, "Honestly, I worry about her constantly. She's basically financially hopeless. I've tried to help, but she just doesn't listen. I pray she finds someone rich to marry, because she'll never own property in this zip code. Still renting at her age, it's quite sad." I stood frozen, my hand gripping the china cup so hard it might shatter. My chest caved in, my throat burned. Every instinct screamed to defend myself, to wave bank statements in their smug faces. But I didn't. I went very quiet, looked through the window at my estate next door, and thought, funny how you're judging me from a house the bank owns while my $4.8 million estate sits next door, bought with cash. I didn't say it. I didn't need to. Their opinion had never been about real numbers. It was about control, keeping me labeled failure so their choices felt like victories. I was about to shatter every illusion without uttering a single word. As I stood in that garden, my mind pulled up buried memories. This pattern had existed all along. I remember being 24, excited about an investment property, trying to share my research at family dinner. My aunt waved her hand to silence me. "Real estate isn't for people like you. That's for people with real capital, connections, and business sense. Focus on building a career first. Maybe in 20 years you can think about a small condo somewhere affordable." I remember overhearing her tell my mother at 26, after I mentioned taking a free finance course, "You need to talk to her about being realistic. All this dreaming about investments, it's setting her up for disappointment. She doesn't have the discipline. Don't waste money encouraging these fantasies." While my cousin received cash gifts, help with rent, co-signed luxury car leases, and seed money for failing business ideas, I received lectures. I received concerned calls asking if I was still struggling. When I moved into a tiny studio I could afford alone, my aunt visited once, looked around with disgust, and said, "At least it's a roof over your head. Maybe one day you'll afford something in a real neighborhood." The constant message was that I was financially irresponsible, naive, and hopeless. They created this narrative and repeated it until even I almost believed it. But here's what they didn't see. While they praised my cousin's mediocre career and bailed them out of disasters, I was working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. While they had champagne brunches discussing my cousin's promising future, I was reading books about real estate investment, taking free courses, studying every successful investor's strategy. I sacrificed every luxury, every vacation, every expensive dinner. I wore the same 5 outfits for 3 years, brought lunch from home daily, and tracked every penny. Without anyone's help or acknowledgement, I built something real. My first property was a duplex everyone called too risky. I lived in one unit, rented the other, and learned plumbing and electrical from YouTube at 2 in the morning. I dealt with difficult tenants and emergency repairs while my family asked when I would get serious about finances. I sold that duplex for profit, leveraged into a triplex, then another property. Each step was calculated, researched, and executed with the discipline that comes from having no safety net. By 32, I had built a portfolio generating passive income while I continued working in better about their choices. While they sipped champagne and reinforced delusions, I was 3 steps ahead, planning an execution so perfect it would become the story they told for generations. As soon as I got home, I made specific phone calls. First, my property manager to accelerate our timeline. The corporate lease was ending in 2 weeks, and I needed visible ownership proof installed at a specific date. Second, my real estate attorney to discuss a custom sign for the front gate featuring my name or LLC name to be installed professionally and prominently. Third, the HOA president to schedule a formal owner meeting the same weekend my aunt was hosting her next elite neighborhood gathering. The timeline came together beautifully. My aunt sent invitations for another Sunday afternoon party, clearly designed to reinforce neighborhood hierarchy. She invited the same people, including me, though her email had a passive-aggressive line about hoping I could take time from work to attend. I accepted enthusiastically, which probably confused her. What she didn't know, I had scheduled every element of my reveal for the same day, same time, with military precision. Landscaping crew arriving mid-party, sign installation in full view, property manager meeting me to hand over documentation, and the HOA president, who knew I owned the estate and was impressed by my responsible ownership, would likely appear to discuss neighborhood business. I told no one what was coming. This needed to unfold naturally, with no warning, no opportunity for spin. I wanted raw, unfiltered reactions. I wanted the exact moment when their constructed reality collided with truth. I wanted to see their faces when they realized the person they'd been mocking was actually the most financially successful family member for years. The plan was simple: let them perform, then let property, paperwork, and undeniable facts speak. No dramatic confrontation, no speeches, no tears. Just quiet, legal, absolute proof that I had succeeded beyond their imagination, while they called me hopeless. The Sunday arrived with perfect weather: clear skies, gentle breeze, golden afternoon light. I dressed carefully again, polished but modest. I arrived on time with another thoughtful gift, settling into my role as the quiet, pathetic family member grateful to be included. My aunt greeted me with the same condescension, asking if I had managed to take the day off work. The party followed the same script: expensive food, flowing champagne, status competitions. My cousin discussed plans to lease a more expensive car and maybe buy a small condo with family help. My aunt beamed, praising how responsible and ambitious they were. At exactly 2:30, right on schedule, I heard trucks approaching. Heads turned toward the sound. Through the hedge separating properties, everyone saw a landscaping truck pull up to the estate gate, followed by equipment vehicles. My aunt frowned at the disruption, muttering about inconsiderate weekend work. Her friend asked, "Is someone finally moving into that estate? It's been empty." My aunt nodded. It's sold to some investment company, paid cash. Impressive, but who knows what kind of person buys through an LLC. The landscaping crew began working on visible front grounds. Then came the masterpiece. A professional installation crew arrived with a large wrapped package. They positioned at the main gate and began unwrapping a custom-made sign. Work was happening in full view, impossible to ignore, and guests actively watched, conversations trailing off. The sign was beautiful, exactly as designed. Wrought iron frame with brass lettering mounted on stone pillars at the entrance. And there, gleaming in afternoon light for everyone to see, was my full legal name followed by Estates in classic serif font. Several guests moved closer to read, squinting at lettering. I saw recognition dawn on faces. Someone pointed, someone whispered, someone turned to look at me with complete confusion. That's when Mrs. Patterson, the HOA president, walked up from her afternoon stroll. She was also a party guest. She approached the group, glanced at the sign, and said in her clear, carrying voice, "Oh, wonderful, they're finally putting up the ownership marker. I've been telling the new owner to make their presence known. Smart woman, that one. Bought the whole estate in cash, no mortgage at all, practically unheard of for that size. Excellent investment, very responsive to HOA communications." The silence was so complete I could hear birds 3 houses away. Every person turned to stare at me. My aunt's face went completely white, champagne frozen halfway to her lips. My cousin's mouth hung open. Guests looked between the sign bearing my name and me sitting calmly, trying to reconcile information with everything they thought they knew. I stood slowly, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the gate with maintained calm. I didn't rush or explain. I simply excused myself politely and walked next door. The gate opened with my code. My property manager waited inside with a leather folder containing documents, keys, and security codes. I greeted him warmly, signed papers, and accepted duplicate keys that gleamed in sunlight. We discussed landscaping, I approved plant selections, and activated the security system with my personal code, while guest members watched from the property line. The interaction took 10 minutes of pure, undeniable truth. I wasn't explaining success or defending choices or asking approval. I was simply existing as owner of a $4.8 million estate, conducting normal property business while they stood frozen with champagne and cruel gossip and shattered assumptions. When I finished, I walked back through the gate, locked it with my personal key, and returned to the party. The silence was deafening. Everyone still staring. No one had moved or touched drinks. They were processing, rewriting their entire understanding of who I was. I sat back down, picked up my teacup as if nothing remarkable happened, and took a sip. It was cold, but I didn't care. I was savoring something more satisfying. I was watching years of condescension and cruel judgment crash into reality's wall and shatter. My aunt's financially hopeless comment hung like a ghost, and everyone knew it. They had heard her say it. They agreed, and now they stood in my property's shadow with nothing to say. The party dissolved within 20 minutes. Guests made awkward excuses, practically fleeing as if humiliation was contagious. My cousin left without goodbye. Friends who nodded along with cruel assessments couldn't meet my eyes. Soon it was just me and my aunt in her garden, surrounded by half-empty champagne and untouched pastries. She stood cycling through emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, embarrassment, possible shame. Finally she spoke, voice shaking with fury and desperation. "You made me look like a fool, an absolute fool in front of everyone. Why didn't you tell us? Since when do you have that kind of money? What kind of person keeps this secret from family?" I set down my teacup carefully and looked at her directly. When I spoke, my voice was calm, measured, absolutely certain. "I didn't tell you because you didn't want to know. For 15 years, you've made clear you weren't interested in my actual life, career, or finances. You were interested in the story you created where I'm struggling and you get to feel superior. Every time I tried talking about investments or plans, you shut me down. You laughed. You told me I was unrealistic. You literally told people I'd never afford to live here. So no, I didn't share success with someone actively rooting for my failure." Her face flushed red. She protested, "I was not rooting for failure. I was protecting you from disappointment. Someone had to tell you the truth about your limitations." I almost laughed. "My limitations?" I repeated. "The only limitations were ones you invented and tried imposing. The only truth that matters is sitting next door with my name on the gate. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your ego by keeping me in the box you created." She shifted tactics with wounded concern. "I tried to help you. I offered advice, and this is how you repay me? By ambushing me? Humiliating me?" I shook my head slowly. "I didn't ambush you. I bought property 18 months ago. I've been a responsible owner, paid HOA fees on time, maintained grounds, followed regulations. The only thing that changed today was I stopped hiding success to make you comfortable. If that feels like an attack, ask yourself why." She struggled to respond, to spin this into a narrative where she was victim. Finally, "You should have told me. Family doesn't keep secrets. Family supports each other." The hypocrisy was suffocating. "Family supports each other?" I repeated with emotion now. Where was that support when I worked 3 jobs to save for my first property? Where was that support when I taught myself real estate from library books? Where was it every time I shared goals and you laughed? You didn't want to support me. You wanted me to stay small so you could feel big. I stepped closer, voice quiet but clear. "Let me remind you what you said at the last party. You told friends I was financially hopeless. You said you hoped I'd find someone rich to marry because I'd never afford property here on my own. You said it was quite sad, remember?" She looked uncomfortable, eyes dropping. "You also told my parents years ago not to waste money supporting my fantasies. You told them I didn't have discipline or resources. You actively discouraged them from believing in me." Her face was pale, hands trembling. I felt no satisfaction, just cold clarity of speaking buried truth. "So here's what happened today. I didn't attack or humiliate you. I simply existed as a successful owner conducting normal business. The fact that it embarrassed you says nothing about my actions and everything about your judgments. You spent years constructing a false narrative, and today reality caught up. That's not my fault. That's yours." She tried once more, voice breaking. "But we're family. You should have given me a chance to know the real you." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who shaped my family's perception wielded opinions like weapons and approval like currency, and felt something release. "I gave you 1,000 chances. Every goal I shared was a chance. Every progress I talked about was a chance. Every gathering I attended despite knowing what you thought was a chance. You chose to see what made you feel superior. Now you're angry